So today we're going to move out of Illustrator and into AutoCAD. How many people have taken AutoCAD before? Okay, a few of you. If you've taken AutoCAD before, this will be just a refresher, probably the very bare basics. I need to talk a little bit about AutoCAD for those of you that have never taken AutoCAD, just so you have some idea why it's included in this class and a little bit more about it. So AutoCAD is really the default drawing application for the design field, whether that is architectural design, whether it's car design, truck design, I don't know, pretty much anything that involves some kind of scaled drawing usually has something to do with AutoCAD. We're moving in the direction now where more stuff is done in 3D. AutoCAD has the ability to do 3D, though it's not the kind of gold standard of three-dimensional modeling. We in this class will explore SketchUp. The world of architecture and product design or industrial design has moved more in the direction of Rhino as their primary 3D modeling program. Sometimes it's extended a bit further into a program that's called Revit that you've probably heard of before. That is a little bit more for the actual construction phase versus the conceptual design phase. But it all kind of stems from AutoCAD. AutoCAD has been around for a very long time. Therefore, it became kind of the gold standard of this sort of work. We in this class used to teach Vectorworks, though I did it kicking and screaming the whole time. Some people like Vectorworks, some people don't. I'm one of the people that don't. But I think it's really important at this level to at least get a little exposure to a true drafting program, a program that's designed for this sort of thing. Thus far, we've covered everything in the Adobe suite, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and those are fine, but they're really meant for the paper scale, right? The things that come out of a piece of paper, the photographs that you print, those kinds of things. When we move into AutoCAD and also into SketchUp in this next little module of the course, we're going to be dealing with things that are much larger in reality. And buildings are obviously the example that we're going to start working with. But the idea is that suddenly, instead of doing something that's going to fit on a piece of paper, we're actually going to draw something that's full scale. And that's kind of one of the biggest shifts that happens when you start working in a true drafting program like in AutoCAD, in that everything is actually full to size. So we're not going to scale anything in our heads. If we're drawing a building that's 10 by 20, 10 feet by 20 feet, when we draw it in AutoCAD, it's going to be 10 feet by 20 feet. So everything's full scale. The scaling to make it into a drawing size comes later. And so that's something that's very important to understand. AutoCAD is not the kind of program that you're going to be able to, having never worked with it before, be completely proficient in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, it's my goal to get you enough skills such that you can kind of work your way around with it and eventually start to figure it out on your own. I'm going to try to hit the basics so that you're comfortable with it. If you move on and take the Rhino class, which I would of course encourage you all to do, the skills that you'll learn in Rhino will be directly applicable to the things that you'll use in AutoCAD and vice versa. There are AutoCAD specific classes offered through the engineering department here that spend the whole semester covering AutoCAD. And you'll end up drafting a lot more objects than buildings, but you'll still get very proficient in AutoCAD. When I learned AutoCAD, it was very much a drafting style. I did a bunch of drafting of little objects and fillets and little metal things that you were constructing. Since then, obviously, I've moved much more into the architectural realm, and so I use it primarily for architecture. So we will start to begin in AutoCAD. We're going to use AutoCAD 2014 because that's what's on these computers. We were supposed to be upgraded to 2015, but that didn't happen. So we're going to start in 2014. If the computers get updated, then they get updated, and we'll be in 2015. There's usually not much difference. There is an icon for AutoCAD here. It's not the alias. It's the one that just says AutoCAD 2014. It's also underneath, probably right here, in your start menu, so you can go ahead and open it up that way. And so this is, we hope, there we go. So this is AutoCAD. And it usually opens up with this splash screen such that you can choose, do you want a new drawing or what have you. This is very much like the world of Illustrator, just written by different people, so it's going to look slightly different. So I can go ahead and click on I want a new drawing. There are a bunch of templates that I can load. Most of this you're going to ignore and just pick the regular AutoCAD template to start with. And I'll go ahead and say open. And this opens up the AutoCAD window. Okay? AutoCAD went through a few transitions. Originally, it was always drawing white lines on a black background. Then it went through a transition in the late 2000s where they switched the background color to be kind of a light color and you were drawing black lines. Now we're back to black backgrounds. The black background is designed for people to be sitting at the computer for a really long time and staring at it. Therefore, it's easier on your eyes. When you go to print an AutoCAD drawing, the colors will automatically reverse. So just because you're drawing in white with a black background doesn't mean when you go to print it's going to be black background with white lines. So it has to do with user interface, has to do with how long people tend to stare at AutoCAD screens and trying to save their eyes. So let me walk through a little bit about what's going on in the world of AutoCAD here. We're going to use the kind of new style menu structure. There is a classic style that I actually got used to using for a long time. This works better for people who have never worked in AutoCAD before, so we're going to stick with the kind of the basic tool setup. So at the very top here we've got our basic file operations: new file, open file, save file, print file, those kinds of things. Next to it there's also a drop down menu, and you'll see by default it'll say drafting and annotation. That's in all likelihood what we will live in, though these are other workspaces that you could change into. So for example, 3D basics or 3D modeling, if you wanted to do 3D modeling, and AutoCAD Classic is the old style menu structure, which is something that's more comfortable for me, but at the same time we're going to learn the new style. So there will be one thing that we do where we'll have to switch into the old style because I have yet to figure out how to do it in the new style, but we'll get there. So with the drafting and annotation workspace selected, we can see that we have a variety of tools, and each of these, let's call them menu items, presents a different set of tools. The home is the most commonly used tool. The first set here, line, polyline, circle, arc, those are all traditional things that we would be drawing. If we move over here, these are basic move and edit operations. So we've got move, copy, rotate, trim, fillet, those kinds of buttons. Right? We move into the next section here, and this is all layer information. We're not going to worry about layers today. We will talk about layers next class. We move forward. Annotation is dimensions, labeling, text, those kinds of things. We'll talk about that. These are blocks, editing and inserting blocks. We probably won't get there, but they're there. Over here is our basic properties. So what color is the object? What's the line weight of the object? What kind of line is it? That sort of thing. And then the rest of these are grouping and ungrouping, measuring, copying, pasting, that sort of thing. So these don't matter so much, but they're there. If we switch into a different set of these ribbons, say the insert ribbon, we get a bunch of different information depending on what we're trying to bring in or do. If we switch to annotate, we get the full annotation menu. If we switch to layout mode, we get the full layout mode. So there's a variety of these options that can help you along the road, but for the most part we're going to live in the home realm. And you see that draw, modify, layers, annotation. Like for example, annotation here has its own large ribbon, but it also has under home a small ribbon that gets us the most commonly used things. So home is a pretty good place to start with what we're doing. So when we look at the AutoCAD window, you can see usually when you first open it there's an X and a Y. You guys kind of see that down in the bottom here? I know it's kind of behind me. That X and the Y has to do with the default structure that is AutoCAD. So AutoCAD, unlike other programs that you've used, has a complete mathematical coordinate system behind it. So everything in AutoCAD is mathematically driven. It's also extraordinarily precise. I think the precision is somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 decimal places. So it's very, very precise. That is that way for a reason. But that being said, the reason that it's so precise is it's all mathematically driven. So if you draw a line, right, it can, AutoCAD by its nature interprets a point and another point and connects the two with a line, right? Likewise, if you have a curve or something complex, an arc or something like that, it will determine the start of the arc, the end of the arc, the radius of the arc, and that sort of thing. It's all mathematical. So that being said, we have what's called a coordinate system, just like you guys remember back in the algebra and algebra 2 days when you had to graph functions and whatever. Same thing happens here. We have an x and a y. X direction is going out this way, which is on the red axis. Y is going up and down here. And we have a point that's called 0, 0 in a coordinate system. That would be right here, kind of where those two cross. Okay? So, that being said, we can take advantage of it. And so what I'm going to do, we don't, when we're doing the AutoCAD section, there's not really a lecture about what we're doing. Like, I'm not going to lecture about floor plans. I'm going to show you the techniques for doing it and assume that you understand that we're drawing the floor plan. So today what we're drawing is on the back of your sheet. It's probably more involved than you're going to get to today, but it's at least there. It gives us some basic idea. If you've been in 136, you recognize this from the early stages of Rhino. Same kind of thing, because it's a really good basic floor plan, get you started. And so on the front, I'm going to start with this first section, part 1, working with the coordinate system. And I want to try to explain how that works. All right. So we have a new AutoCAD drawing. First thing that we need to do is make sure that our units match up with what we're going to be drawing in. And so we're going to be drawing in feet and inches. So I want to make sure that my modeling is in feet and inches. So I'm going to type the command units, if I can type. And so the thing about AutoCAD is there is something that's called a command line. I should have mentioned that. It lives down here at the bottom, and it allows you to access menu items without having to actually pick a button. And I could get to the units through the menu structure, but I'd have to switch to the classic mode to find it. I'm trying to see if I can find it here. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to type units. And that brings up the drawing units. And you see right now our units are in decimals. We don't want our units to be in decimals. We want them to be in architectural. So I'm going to change to architectural. It gives us the option to specify a precision. Remember, I said it could be accurate to 16 decimal places. Right now it's setting our precision at 1/16 of an inch, which for architectural terms is plenty sophisticated enough. We don't need to get down to the 30 seconds or the 64ths. So we're going to go with that, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And now my units have changed. And now I'm going to go ahead and start drawing. Oh, and there's one other thing. And of course, this changed. I was in the other lab when I was prepping for this. And there's a button. Okay. In the other lab, these don't have the icons. They have little text representations instead. So we're going to turn off the dynamic. Where do we find it? It's this one. It's the little L shape with the star on it. We're going to turn off the dynamic UCS. Do you have the writing? So, go figure. DYN. Yeah, so you're going to turn off DYN. Okay, and I'm turning off DYN for now because I want to explain the coordinate system. Long term, you may end up leaving it on. So if you can't see it, because it's directly blocking it, it's either going to be a button that says DYN on it, or it's going to be a button that looks like that. And so if I click on it, it will turn from being kind of a bluish color to being a gray. That means it's off, which is what we want. And so now I'm going to go up, and I have two options that I can work with. I can work with either a polyline or a line. A line is point A to point B, nothing more. A polyline is point A to point B, but if you want to continue it to point C, it'll be point C and D and E and F, right? So it'll be a continuous line through a bunch of points. So by default, I would like you to get used to using the polyline because it's a little bit easier to work with long term. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on the polyline tool. I can also type p-line or polyline to start that command. And now I'm going to specify on the coordinate system where I want to draw this point. And so I'm going to start at point 0, 0. And I'm doing this as an exercise of understanding what the coordinate system is and how it works. In reality, you don't have to start at 0, 0. You can start anywhere on the page you want, but I at least want to kind of illustrate coordinate system. So I'm going to type in 0, 0. Okay, and you can see down here in the command line that it says specify start point, and I'm specifying 0, 0. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And this is written out in your exercise 120 handout specifically, right, for what you're doing. So it is all step by step. So you see that once I type point 0, 0, it puts the starting point of my line at 0, 0. Okay? So I can continue with the coordinate system to draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the back side of this building here. Okay? So the next coordinate that I need is 0, 24 feet, because the back side of that building is 24 feet. So the reason I'm getting 0, 24 feet is because I'm not going anything in the x direction. Remember, the x value is always first. So it's going to be 0, comma, and then I want to go 24 feet up. So I'll type 24 feet. And when I hit enter, it will draw a line way up on my x-axis. And because good old AutoCAD doesn't want to zoom all the way out for me, I'm going to hit enter to finish this. And then I'm going to zoom. And I would really like to use just the basic zoom here. It's going to be under View, and there's a button for Extents, and it's going to show me the whole line. I apologize that AutoCAD, the scroll wheel should zoom all the way out, but it was stuck in a little bit closer field of view. So once again, I went to the View menu, and I clicked on the Extents button. This means show me everything. Okay, so I'm going to click back on the Home ribbon. I'm going to go back to my polyline. And I want to make sure non-AutoCAD people have gotten there. I don't want to lose them yet. Hit enter. Now go to the View and hit Extend. Now you can zoom out just a little bit. It's actually not Control plus and Control minus anymore, it's just the scroll wheel. Anymore. Use the little scroll wheel, there you go. I'm going to walk around, make sure people have gotten here. I know I'll have a lot to take into. Like I said, if you're familiar with AutoCAD, just bear with us. It's good to do. Okay, I think we have everybody. I did notice there's one other field that for right now I'm going to have you turn off down here. There's a button for dynamic input as well. It looks like and these two buttons ultimately you're probably going to leave on. Just for clarity of explaining how to kind of work with the coordinate system, it's easier if they're turned off right now. So it's DYN something. The BUCS. BUCS. So both of these go off, or both of these go off, depending on which setup you have. Why those are different, I have no idea. All right, so I've drawn that 24-foot line. Now, when I go to draw again, I'm going to pick the polyline tool, and you'll notice something that AutoCAD calls snapping, and it's called object snap to be precise. And so when I move close to an end of an object, see how I get that green square that shows up? What snapping does is it says, I want to start a line, but I want it to start exactly at the point that this other line ended. And so if I didn't have it on, okay, you don't have to do this, I'm just doing this for an illustration here. Okay, and it didn't show up, I'd say, oh, okay, well, I'll just start close to this. So I did it with the mouse, and I'll start close. However, if I zoom in, let me just go ahead and draw a little line here. The closer I get, the more I realize that these 2 points really aren't on top of each other. Right? They're actually, let's see how far apart they are. They're 5/8 of an inch apart. Okay? So those are the kinds of errors that we don't want to see in AutoCAD. So instead of just arbitrarily trying to pick a point, right, I'm going to use that object snap, which is turned on. It's also, it's called O-snap, or it's a little box with a star on one corner. Okay? And what that does is when I get close to an end, it will automatically jump to that end point. So if I were to draw a line and zoom in, right, no matter how close I get, no matter how much I zoom in, it's always going to meet right at the same point. So object snap is generally something you'll always want to have on in the background. And therefore it is on by default. Right? So object snap is on. I'm going to go to polyline. I'm going to click on the end. It's going to give me that little green square. And I'm going to draw my next coordinate. And so in this instance, my next coordinate, because these two are off, these two options, I'm going to type in, let's see if I remember here, 12 feet, 24 feet. And so this is what's called an absolute coordinate, which basically is saying in the general XY plane, right, if this is point 0, this is point 0, 24 feet, this point is 12 feet, 24 feet in absolute coordinates. Okay? So at any point, I'm going to go ahead and finish here for a second. So I could say I want to start a line at 24 feet, 36 feet, and it would show up at 24 feet over, 36 feet up. Okay? That's an absolute coordinate. In reality, right, a lot of times we'd rather use something called a relative coordinate, because let's say I'm off over in space somewhere way over here, I don't really know what the coordinate is, I can use what's called a relative coordinate instead. So if I'm at this point and I want to use a relative coordinate, I type the @ sign, which says relative to the last point, how do I want to go? So in this instance, I want to go 0 in the x, 0, comma, -6 feet, and I now draw a line down 6 feet from the last point. So relative coordinates say, I'm at a certain point, what do I want to do? So right now I want to go over 12 feet, so from this last point, what do I want to do? I want to go 12 feet, so I say at 12 feet, comma, 0. And I can add feet, 0 is obviously doesn't require a foot mark. And it will draw that line. I could repeat this and say at negative 0, at 0, comma, negative 12 feet. Enter. Okay? So, that being said, okay, understanding the absolute coordinates there, okay, if we turn back on the dynamic input and the dynamic UCS, right, I will get the ability to just type in a value. So instead of using a coordinate, I can just type in, say, 12 feet, and it's going to automatically go in the direction that my mouse is going. So I can say 6 feet, and then I can come all the way to the end. Okay, so it takes a little bit of practice to get used to this. The reason I wanted to show you the coordinates is just so that you could have a general understanding of the coordinate system exists. But a lot of times you'll have these two options on, which just means you point the mouse in the direction you want to go and type in a value, which is usually the easiest way of doing it. Right, so once again, I'm going to repeat this. I'll turn those two off so we can work through our coordinate system. Right, so let me start with a polyline. I'm not going to start at point 0, 0. I'm going to start at point, let's say, 36. No, it's got to be more than that. 48, comma, 0 feet. So I'm way over here. Now I'm going to go up. In this case, it's going to be 48 feet, comma, 24 feet. Right, to go straight up. Remember, I'm starting at 48. That's why I typed in 48. Okay. Now I'm going to go over. And so in this instance, if it was an absolute coordinates, this is why absolute coordinates can be a little bit challenging. It would be 48 plus 12, which would be 60. So I'd say at 60 feet, comma, 0. Oops, apparently I didn't do it right. 60 feet, comma, 0. Nope. 60 feet, comma, 24 feet. There we go. Sorry, trying to do it in my head. Okay, so that's a little hard. So instead of doing that, I'm going to switch to relative coordinates. This means I can say at, relative to the last point, 0, comma, negative 6 feet. I'm going to go down 6. And then this would be at 12 feet, comma, 0. Go across 12. At negative, it's at 0, comma, negative 12 feet. And so this would be at negative 12 feet, comma, 0, because I'm working my way around. And so what would this? At 0, comma, negative 6 feet. And then I'll close my shape. Okay? So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but I at least want you to know that that exists. Okay? In reality, you're going to have the dynamic UCS and also the dynamic input both turned on. And so if I were starting here, drawing, I'm way over here in the negative space, but I'm not going to do any math. I'm just going to start at a point. And you see how when I start to draw, it gives me a line and it tells me how long that line is. Okay? This is a text field, so I can replace this with a value. And so once again, I turned on those dynamic buttons, and now I can type in just 24 feet, and it will set my line at 24 feet. When I go across here, right, it's kind of hard to get right at 12 feet. So instead of that, I'm just going to type in 12 feet, and I get 12 feet. Now if I go down, right, we'll type 6 feet, and then we'll go over for 12 feet. We'll go down for 12 feet. We'll go over for 12 feet. Down for 6 feet. And then across. So one of the things that I want you to get familiar with today is practicing how to draw this. Right? And so there is no right or wrong way. Just because I say to use the coordinates first doesn't mean that that's the right way to do it. I just want to try to explain how AutoCAD works. In reality, turning these two dynamic inputs buttons on will help a great deal. So you'll probably end up with those on. Okay? So let's move on to the next command that we're going to learn. And that is the offset command. And so we have some options for how that works. If we look over here, wouldn't it be nice if offset was listed under modify? Hold on a second. I'm so used to typing offset. It would be nice if it was available for me. Ah, it is available. Sorry. Okay, so in our home ribbon here, right there, looks like an icon. Something like that. This is offset. And what offset does, oh, excuse me, it's open. What offset does, when I click it, is it's going to ask me first for specify offset distance. So this is how far apart I want the lines to be. So we'll say 6 inches. And then it says select object to offset. So I'm going to pick this first object. Actually, it doesn't really matter which one I pick. Let's say I pick this object. And it's going to ask me then which side it wants to offset on. So it's going to offset at 6 inches, but do I want it to the outside or to the inside? And it gives you a preview so you can kind of decide which direction you want it to go. So I want it to go to the inside, okay? And so it doubled my lines, and they're 6 inches apart. Now I have a couple more lines that need to be offset as well. So let me click on this line and say to the inside, and this line and say to the inside as well. Okay, I'm done. I'll press enter on the keyboard. Let me do it once again over here. I pick the offset tool. It says specify offset distance, so I'll type in 6 inches. If ever in AutoCAD you're lost, look down here because it'll give you a prompt for what's next. So offset, select object to offset. Okay, let me select my object, there it is. And in this case, I had drawn this polyline all the way around, so it's going to offset the whole thing at once. Okay, I want it to be toward the inside, so I'll pick on the inside, and it's created that double set of lines. Yeah. Yes. So if you want to make it into one whole line, you can use join. And I don't remember, explode is up here under modify. I don't know if join is. You can type join. Yeah, I don't see it. So your question was, if we had an object like this one, and they were drawn as individual separate lines, like this, see how they're all different? If I go to offset them, distance 6 inches, I would have to do each one of them separately. Instead of doing that, I can join them first. So let me go ahead and get rid of those. I can select my objects, and then I can join them. I'll just type join, and they will go from being a whole bunch of separate objects into one continuous object, which then makes the offset much easier. 6 inches to the inside, and there you go. You don't get the overlapping corners. So over here, I got those overlapping corners, which is something that I'd have to clean up. Okay, so that's how offset works. Part 3 is the trim command, and this is probably one of the more valuable AutoCAD commands. And this happens whenever you have lines that go past one another. And so I have a couple here on purpose so that I can illustrate the trim command. I will also do it to cut a door through this wall. So in order to do this, let me get out of my offset command. If you feel stuck sometimes in AutoCAD, just pressing the escape key will get you out of whatever you're doing. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and use the trim command. The trim command is right up here. It says trim. It's also a line with a ... next to it. And when I use the trim command, first thing it's going to say is trim. select objects or select all, right? So I can select all, or I can just select the objects that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and make a selection. Now, in AutoCAD, there's two different ways of selecting, and this may be too much information, so I will repeat this down the road. If you select from the right to the left, anything your cursor or your square touches will be selected. If you select from the left to the right, anything that's contained entirely within your selection will be selected. Right? So there's two different ways of selecting, and you notice one of them's green and one of them's blue, depending on which way you move the mouse. Right? So you'll get used to this over time, but right now, it's nothing to worry about, though I wanted to at least point it out at this stage. You will spend a little bit more time. We'll discuss that probably individually as well. So I've selected my objects, which I just did. I'll go ahead and hit enter. Right? Then I'm going to select the parts that I want to go away. Right? So I'll select this piece and this piece. I'll zoom in and I'll select this piece and I'll select that piece. Right? So it just trims off the excess. So whenever a line goes past, we can trim it. Okay? So let's repeat this. Right? This time I want to draw a door. And I'm going to draw it in the center of this wall. So let me start with either a polyline or a line. And I'd like to draw it right in the center. And so since I don't know exactly where the center is, I'm going to come down here to those object snaps that we talked about before. And if I right-click on the object snap button, I'll get a bunch of other options. And so one of the options is midpoint, which will allow me to snap right to the midpoint of one of my lines. So I'll select midpoint, and this will let me snap. See how it gives me a triangle instead of a square? That's the symbol for midpoint. And so I can snap from there to there. And now that I'm done, I'll go ahead and press enter. And that gives me a little line. Now I'll use the offset command to create either side of the door. So let me go to offset. My distance, right, this time isn't going to be 6 inches, it's going to be 18 inches, because that's half of what the door is. And I'm going to pick my little line, and we're going to go 18 inches there, and 18 inches there. Okay? Once I've done that, I've established where the sides of the door are. Now I can come back in and I can trim out the pieces of the wall that shouldn't be there. Right, so I'll come back to, let me finish the offset command, then I'll come back to the trim command. I'm going to say select objects to trim, so we'll select the objects, I'll hit enter, and then I can just click to get rid of these pieces. Okay. It's not going to let me get rid of this piece because it doesn't intersect anything. So I'll actually have to go in and delete that after the fact. So I hit enter to finish the command, I can select my objects, and press delete. And now I've cut a hole in my wall. Okay? So there are obviously more holes to cut. There's also a lot for you guys to take in and to learn today. I'm not expecting much out of this, but at the same time I'll come through and really try to sit down with each one of you and help you through this, learning these basic commands. In doing this, I've gone through this assignment with a couple other classes. You will pick up on this. Right? It'll seem very daunting right now, but you will pick up on it. You'll be able to do this. This drawing is not something that you won't be able to do. You'll be able to do it. So, that being said, right, there is also a handout for what's going to happen for assignment 105. Okay? This is the first time that I'm giving an assignment for the AutoCAD class. We did it as an experiment last year, or last semester, to see if it would work, and people seemed receptive to it, so we're going to try it as an assignment. That being said, since it's the first time, if something doesn't work, or I feel like it doesn't, it's not getting the results that we're after, since it's a trial run, we're going to see how it goes, right? And recognize, of course, that I'll be lenient because it's the first run through. Okay, so you just try your best, and you'll be just fine on it. Don't panic yet. This cabin is not something that's going to end with assignment 105. We're going to move on and do a SketchUp version of this, where you're going to model it in 3D, and then we'll talk about collaging it and getting elevations and sections out of SketchUp. So think about how you want it to be designed, such that it will play out over time. If it evolves from this version, the AutoCAD version, when you get into SketchUp, there's no problem with that either. Okay, but I'm just kind of giving you this as a heads up down the road. Not something that you're going to start working on today. right? We're going to concentrate just on AutoCAD first, and then we'll move into to working on this as well. Okay, so there are other commands that are obviously available to you in AutoCAD. If you feel like getting them or playing around with them, by all means you can play around with them. Some of them might be extend, fillet, chamfer, mirror, or rotate, depending on what you're trying to do. If those seem too much, don't do them yet. Right? Just concentrate on the basics. And I can show you more about creating the windows and that sort of thing. But I want to give people enough time to actually start playing around with this and learning from it. So don't be shy. If you feel like you're stuck, call me over. We'll sit down. We'll get through it. Okay.